So I was asked to do a quick presentation to give an introduction to the new refrigerant for Mitsubishi dealers. My name's Aaron Larson. I'm the Technical Services Manager for Gensco. A training American Standard Field Service Rep, as well as a Mitsubishi Diamond Service Group member, so a DSG as well. I work with DSGs that you guys work with every day. I work with them quite a bit as well. I know David's on here. A couple of the others might be on as well. I haven't looked. So without further ado, let's dive into this. We've got a lot of changes coming this year and next that are going to really affect how we deal with equipment and what our equipment's doing. We're changing the refrigerants. So back in '87, the Montreal Protocol was enacted, began the phase out of CFCs like R12 and HCFCs like R22, right? In 2010, R22 was officially phased out, okay? In 2020, we could no longer make or import new R22. Everything that after that is a recycled. Once the stocks built up prior to 2020 run out, everything will be a recycled R22. In 2016, host nations got together in Kigali, Africa, and they created the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. All right, this was to begin the phase down of HFCs to a lower global warming potential product, or GWP. All right, now this is a phase down, not a phase out, and that's the two big differences between the original Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. The original Montreal Protocol was a phase out so that we could save the hole in the ozone. The Kigali Amendment is a phase down, so we're going to use less HFCs with high global warming potentials. The US and Canada did not join the Kigali Amendment in 2016. However, in December of 2020, the AIM Act was signed into law. All right. This gave the EPA the legal authority to follow the Kigali phase down. This is very important because in the years recent, we've seen where the EPA and the Department of Energy have very specifically had rulings overturned. One second. Rulings overturned that because they didn't have the legal authority to make those rules. The AIM Act does specifically give the EPA the legal authority to make those rules. All right, so seeing how the AIM Act was signed into law to follow the Kigali phase down, the US Senate, not to be out grandstanded by anybody, decided that they needed to go ahead and ratify the Kigali Amendment, so it's now a treaty in place as an amendment to the Montreal Protocol. So it's an international treaty now. So all of that really means that we are going to be phasing down. There is not a lawsuit or anything like that that's going to stop it. So we need to be prepared for it, and we're moving forward. So behind the Montreal Protocol was the ozone depletion potential. All right, we were concerned about what the chlorine in the molecules were doing inside CFCs and HCFCs to the ozone layer, creating a hole. We're now concerned about global warming potential. Okay. Now you'll notice on that chart in the lower right corner here, all right, fluorinated gases only make up about 2% of overall greenhouse gas emissions. It's a very small percentage, but these fluorinated gases are several thousand times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a minute. Just understand that carbon dioxide has a global warming potential of 1. Okay. And so when you see a global warming potential of 2000, that means it is 2,000 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. So releasing 1 cubic foot of a GWP of 2,000 is the same as releasing 2,000 cubic feet of CO2. So that's a very important distinction when we talk about this. So the goal of the transition of the Kigali Amendment and the AIM Act is reducing our emissions of fluorinated gases, or the high global warming potential products. We want to maintain or improve capacity and energy efficiency. We don't want to, we still got to maintain temperature in homes, right? We still need to hit our minimum energy efficiency. So that was a challenge that manufacturers had to work through. Then, of course, maintain or improve safety and reliability. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about safety here in just a minute. All right. So, like I said, AIM Act requires us to reduce our production and consumption of high global warming potential products. And you can see on this chart, this is actually the Kigali Amendment. All right. 410A has a global warming potential of 2,088. R32 is 677, R454B is 466. We're going to talk more about that here in just a minute. But we're going to follow a phase down procedure very similar to the Montreal Protocol. Now, the EPA has ruled that the maximum global warming potential will be 700 as of January 1, 2025. We'll talk more about that and dates and all that fun stuff here in a minute. All right. So a lot of people refer to the new refrigerants as A2L. All right. So A2L is an ASHRAE designation. Okay. If you go to ASHRAE 34, it'll explain all of this, but I'm going to give you a real quick rundown. We got two columns right here. One column is the A column. The right-hand column is the B column. A column is low toxicity, meaning that if you have a Class A refrigerant, if you get some on your skin, breathe a little bit in, it's probably not going to kill you. Okay? However, on the B classification, it has a very high toxicity. So breathing some of that in or getting some of that on your skin could be life-threatening, could be toxic. Okay, so that's the two columns. Now, let's talk about the numbers. 1, 2, 3. All right, 1 is no flame propagation. Doesn't say non-flammable. It says no flame propagation. And what that very specifically means is that, yes, the refrigerant will burn. However, once you remove the source of ignition, the refrigerant will no longer burn. So R22 was an A1. R410A is an A1. Okay. Now, an A2 refrigerant is a refrigerant that has some flammability properties. Okay. A3 is a very high flammability. So an A3 would be methane, propane, butane, something like that. Very high flammability, very high energy release, very easy to ignite. Okay. When they started working with the new refrigerants, they kind of figured out, well, yeah, technically they are flammable, meaning that they will carry flame. However, it's very hard to get them ignited, meaning it takes a lot of energy to ignite them. They don't burn very fast. And the energy that they release is very low. So it really didn't meet the minimum requirements of A2L, but we couldn't, or A2, but we couldn't call it an A1 because once you lit it, it would continue to burn. So they came up with a new designation of A2L, which is an A2 with low flammability. Okay, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. All right, so now we're going to have a newer type of refrigerant called an HFO, hydrofluoroolefins. We're very familiar with HFCs, but the industry has settled on two primary refrigerants. R454B, which is the primary refrigerant that we'll have in the US, and R32. Now, unbeknownst to all of you, you've already dealt with R32. R410A is 50% R125 and 50% R32. So 410A is a class 400 refrigerant, hence 4 in 410A. So it's a mixed refrigerant. Okay. R454B is 68.9% R32 and 38.1% or 39.1% R1234YZ. Incidentally, this is the same refrigerant. That 1234YZ is what's being used in automotive today. So those are our two primary refrigerants. All right, so what refrigerant and why? Obviously, R22 went away in 2010 due to ozone depletion potential. It has a global warming potential of 1,810, so it's not really a good option to go back to. R410, which is going to be basically phased out in equipment in 2025, has a zero ozone depletion potential, but its global warming potential is 2088. Now, so our HFC R32, global warming potential 675, the HFO R454B has global warming potential of 466, ozone depletion of 0. So we're moving that global warming potential down. All right, nearly all manufacturers have announced 454B, all US manufacturers, Mitsubishi included, okay? Daikin, Goodman, and Mana are the only US manufacturer using R32. Mitsubishi is going with R454. It has a lower GWP, which means it's going to have a longer life in the industry. We'll talk about that here in just a second. It's less flammable. It has lower flammability characteristics. It's a safer refrigerant, in other words. Okay. Very similar operating pressures to 410A. Actually, both of them are fairly similar. R32 is going to be a little higher. 454 is going to be a little lower. Okay. So let's talk about some of the baloney that I've heard out in the field. Some of this stuff is really, really interesting. New refrigerants are explosive, or the new refrigerants have propane, butane, methane, etc. in them. Non-sparking tools are required, meaning I've heard that companies believe that they have to refit all of their trucks with brass hand tools and new brushless drills and power tools. Guys, that's not real. All right. It takes more than, they're not explosive. They don't have propane, butane, all of that in it. And it takes a lot more than what a tool spark to ignite these. And I'll show you that here in a minute. I've heard R32 is more efficient than 454B. While technically that's true, BTUs per pound, R32 carries, it's like 2% more BTUs per pound. The last time I checked, we don't rate efficiency of air conditioners or heat pumps in BTUs per pound of refrigerant. It's not a real thing. Okay? We rate in SEER, EER, HSPF. We don't really care that we have 2% more weight of R454B in that same 3-ton unit. That's for the engineers at the factory to figure out. We care about SEER rating, BTUs versus watts, right? So I've heard that multiple times. It's not worth us worrying about. I've heard R32 is a drop-in for 410A because it's very close to 410A, and the 410A is already 50% R32. Guys, that's not true. R32 is not a direct drop-in for 410A. Currently, there is not a direct replacement for 410A. R454B has a significant glide, meaning no more top off. R400 level refrigerants. So anything starts out with R4 is a blended refrigerant. All right. They all have a glide. All right. 410A has a glide of, I believe it's 0.9 degrees. It's a very low glide. 454B has a glide of about 2 degrees. I think it's actually 1.9 or 1.8, something like that. It's very insignificant. So yes, we will be able to top off. There's not going to be issues with that. However, if you have a leak, just like with any product, you should find it, fix it, so that you're not going back and topping off every year. It's not a good plan. It's expensive for a homeowner. And I've also heard R454B is going away in 5 years. Well, based on our chart here, currently, we're at 700 GWP as of January 1 of next year, which puts us right in this neighborhood. Eventually, EPA is going to come out with another ruling that says we're going to have to drop again. So chances are, we believe 454 is going to have a longer life in our industry. Now, for all of you who are as young as I am or younger, basically, if you're under 50, chances are you're going to see another refrigerant change within your career. All right. One other thing I'd like to point out, 410A is not going away. This is a phase down, not a phase out. Is the price of 410A going to go up as demand goes up and supplies go down? Absolutely. But it's not going away like R22, R12 did. So these are all misconceptions. There's a lot of misinformation out there. If you have questions, please get with the technical team. Please get with your sales rep. We'll help you out. All right. So I mentioned earlier that these refrigerants are flammable, but they're still pretty safe and they're hard to ignite. So remember, they burn very, very slowly. They're difficult to ignite, and they release very little energy when they do ignite. Okay. Now, in the video on the right, you can see a little blue dot moving up that column. All right. That is real-time video of R32 being ignited. That is how fast it moves. That thing's about 4 feet long. And it takes several seconds for that thing to get to the end. Okay. It burns very slowly. Okay. And that video is from Chemours. Dr. Chuck is who developed R454. All right. So R32 is easier to ignite than R454. It takes approximately 30 millijoules versus just over 100 for 454. That's how much energy it takes to ignite. And it burns faster than R454. And you can see how slow R32 is burning there. And R454 burns slower than that. All right. Unfortunately, I don't have a video of 454. That'd be much funner. All right. So AHRI commissioned the University of Maryland to do testing for them to find out what would ignite R32 and R454. Well, they focused on R32 because I told you it was easier to ignite, meaning it takes less energy to ignite. For reference, I told you that it was 30 millijoules. A spark plug on a car is about 20 millijoules. A brand new spark plug on a car is about 20 millijoules. For all you gearheads out there that have been zapped by a spark plug wire. All right. So they did some testing. They got the R32 at the proper mix oxygen versus refrigerant, and they inserted a cigarette, a piezo barbecue lighter, the arc off of a plug receptacle under load, light switch arc, a hand mixer like a egg beater, cordless drills, hair dryer, toasters, all of these items, electric heating elements, none of them could produce the amount of energy to ignite R32. So it's not like we're going to see this ignite. All right, it's pretty much going to take open flame to ignite it. However, we deal with torches in the field, so our service procedures are going to have to change a little bit. Okay, so from a homeowner's perspective, there's not much they're going to be able to do to ignite this. All right, but I did say open flame would do it. So let's talk about how safe is it really in a house. Well, if we take an SUZ KA36 NAHD, it holds about 11 pounds, 7 ounces of R410A. Well, just for kicks and giggles, let's say that it holds the same amount of R454B. Probably it's going to be less, but we're going to go with this. If you take an 1,800 square foot house with 8-foot ceilings, that gives you 14,400 square feet. If you do all of the math, it takes 286 pounds of refrigerant to meet the minimum point of ignition in that 8-foot house. But wait, refrigerant's heavier than air. So if we don't have good air circulation, all of that refrigerant's going to settle to the floor. Well, okay, let's settle it all to the floor. Let's turn off the fan. All of it settles within a foot of the floor. That's still going to take nearly 36 pounds of refrigerant, more than 3 times what the unit holds, to reach minimum ignition. Because you have to have at least a certain amount of fuel to oxygen ratio to ignite. What I'm telling you is you'd have to leak this unit or leak this refrigerant into that house multiple times in a very short amount of time to where we finally get to a point that we can ignite. Point is, we're not going to get there in normal circumstances. Now, if you discharge a couple jugs of refrigerant into a house, yeah, you might meet ignition point if you're got an open flame somewhere. So my point is, probably not going to have any issues. I would be shocked. It would almost have to be purposeful to reach ignition point. Okay. So why all the new rules? There's a lot of new rules coming with it. Well, some of it's for our safety as technicians in the field, but quite frankly, most of it is a concern for our firefighters. That's it. That's why we're going to have a lot of the new rules, is to prevent accidental discharge. And then if we have an accidental discharge in the middle of fire, it can create a more hazardous environment for firefighters. So that was the biggest part of the design of A2L safeties. Okay. It's not for us. It's not for our homeowners. It's for firefighters. All right. So when's this transitioning happening? Well, when we transitioned from 22 to 410A, we had over 10 years. Systems will start to transition at the end of this year. All R410A systems built before January 1st must be sold and installed by January 1st of 2026. We have 1 year to sell through everything we are building this year in 410A product. After January, units built after January 1 of 2025, they can only be used for service. All right. And what that means is we're going to have some units that we're going to be able to, if we have a indoor head fail, we're going to be able to replace that indoor head. If we have an outdoor unit fail, we're likely going to have an outdoor unit that we can replace it with as a service item. Now, you're not going to be able to replace indoor and outdoor because that's now a system. Okay. And there's some clarification stuff going on there with UL and ASHRAE and code and AHRI and all sorts of fun other acronyms. But that's as the rules read right now. Okay, so let's talk about what's staying the same. Our equipment sizing procedures, no changes. Airflow requirements are still going to be the same. We still have to move those BTUs. Unit dimensions are going to be very similar, if not the same. Our duct design is exactly what we do today. Nothing changes there. We're going to have very similar operating pressures. Like I said, 454B is actually just a little bit less than R410A, about 8-9% less. Not a bunch, but a little bit. Very similar installation and commissioning procedures. We are going to have a couple of code things change there. Line set, piping, material, and connections. That all stays the same. If you're using RLS fittings today, great, keep using them on 454. If you're brazing, flaring, great, keep doing it. It's fine. All right. There's not any changes with how we connect our equipment, the materials we use. All right. So like I said, we're still okay. UL still allows all of these different types of connections. All right. Mechanical connections, compression connections, compression connections. We're fine. Okay. So everything's good there. We're going to still do the same thing that we did with 410A. Okay. So let's talk about what is changing. We're going to have less refrigerant in the system. Okay. Our indoor and outdoor units must be UL approved for the refrigerant they serve. All right. So as of right now, we're trying to get manufacturers are trying to get clarification from UL on this. But as of right now, you cannot use a 454 indoor head on a 410 unit or vice versa. Okay. They're trying to get some clarification to see if we can get some of that done, because that'd make life a whole lot easier. But as of right now, the answer is no. They both have to be either approved for 410A or indoor and outdoor have to be approved for 454. You cannot mix and match. We are going to have some new codes and standards. If you go to codes.iccsafe.org, you can select your state and go look at the current codes for your state. Washington, I was looking at that with one of the sales managers the other day, and all of the updated information as of August of 2023 is in blue. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to look at all of our states, but you can go there and take a look at that. Please work with your local code official on this. Anthony, I'm going to get there. All right. So there's going to be more stringent pressure testing and vacuum testing. You may have to prove to your inspector that you hit a certain vacuum level, and it may have to hold that vacuum for a certain amount of time. Again, work with your local inspector. Refrigerant leak detection and mitigation strategy, I should have changed that, will be required. That will be a standard on the equipment. That will be a UL part of it. All right. Our service and repair procedures, you can see the chart off to the side. Kind of shows the differences in our practices between A1 and A2L. All right. With A1, purging circuit with inert gas like nitrogen, it says was a good practice. In my opinion, that was required then to prevent the buildup of copper oxides. It's going to be required on A2L. It should be required on all A1s. If you're not using nitrogen today when you're doing installs or repairs on brazing, please start today. All right. So as you go through a repair, we're going to remove our refrigerant just like normal. We're going to do our repair by, we're going to purge our circuit with inert gas, meaning before we put a torch to a compressor, a TXV, what have you, we are going to purge with a certain amount of inert gas. I'll repeat the code here in just a minute. We're going to evacuate, meaning we're going to put the vacuum pump onto this system. We're going to make sure that we drop that pressure down so that we don't have refrigerant trapped under our compressor oil, something like that, to huff out while we're trying to unbraze something. That would not be the best situation, to have a flammable refrigerant huffing on us while we're trying to braze. Okay. Once we've done that, we're going to bring it back to zero with nitrogen, and we're going to go ahead and open up the circuit by cutting or brazing. We're going to do our repair, purging with nitrogen again. Okay. We're going to leak test, pressure test unit, evacuate the system, charge it. In new installs, we're going to braze everything up if we're brazing with nitrogen during our brazing process. We're going to leak test, pressure test the unit, just like we've done before. We're going to use a micron gauge when we evacuate the system, and then charge as necessary. So not a lot changed, but if you're not using nitrogen while brazing, and you're not doing micron gauges today, you're just going, well, I run the vacuum pump for 30 minutes, or I run it for an hour, or I run it for a while. That's not good enough. You really need to do some changes of practice. If you need help with that, get with the DSGs, get with tech services, get with your sales reps. We will help you get down the right path. Tools will need to be A2L compatible. All right, so let's talk about the tools for a minute. I know we've got some questions on that. So, we'll get to tools, sorry. Some of the implications of A2Ls. Honestly, from your truck standpoint, it's going to be the same thing as it is today. The one thing I'll tell you is you're going to want to store your tanks upright, or if you store them horizontally, you're going to need to have the pressure relief at the highest point of the tank. Okay. That'll make more sense when you start to see them. Okay. Of course, preferably an open air truck. Well, they said that about 410A too. So if you can, ventilate the truck. If you can't, you're still allowed 6 cylinders. All right. So what is Gensco doing? We're working with Mitsubishi on a transition plan. And the goal is that when we receive 410 or 454 equipment, we receive it all. We'll have new model numbers to differentiate so that there won't be a mistake of getting this product with that product. It's going to have all new model numbers. Okay. And when we receive everything, we're going to receive within a month, we're going to receive our entire stock, all of our models. Okay. That's the plan. So we're not going to have some of this and some of that. We're going to develop a training curriculum for your dealers and your technicians, meaning that we are going to create a curriculum to help your guys understand how to safely handle the product, the changes in the equipment. We're going to see, because of those refrigerant detection systems, we're going to see some equipment changes. We're going to see some operational changes, not that your homeowners are going to see, but your technicians are going to see. And we're going to go a little deeper into the purging and the repair strategies behind the products. We are actively bringing in tools that are A2L compatible. Now, I talked a little bit about drills and brass screwdrivers and all of that. You don't need to go brushless drills and brass hand tools and all of that, okay? Or non-sparking hand tools. But your gauges do need to be compatible with 32 and 454, okay? If you're using field piece gauges, you can do an update. If you're using the electronic wireless gauges down here that you use the JobLink app for, you can use those. The app is constantly updated. All right. Those are all approved. Your hoses that you use today are the same hoses that you're going to use next week or when the new refrigerants come out, right? Next year. Okay. So nothing changes on the hoses. All right. But your gauges do need to be able to read it. Okay. Your pumps and your recovery units do need to change. Okay. They do need to go to a different type of motor from a safety aspect, and your recovery units do need to be a different type of unit. They are all brushless DC motors. The Appion, they did approve their recovery units for A2L. So they are A2L compliant as well. So our Appion units that we have on our shelf today are approved. And that you can actually get a certificate of approval on their website if your inspector asks you about it. So all of our NAVAC, all of our field piece, all of our Appion recovery units and vacuum pumps are A2L approved. All right. So additional resources, of course, reach out to your sales rep, the tech team. We've got some resources on genscocustomer.com. ASHRAE 15 is what all of the codes were based on. So there's a lot of information in ASHRAE 15, and 15.2 is just the residential version. If you buy ASHRAE 15, you get ASHRAE 34 with it. ACCA.org has a lot of good information. It has a training in there. AHRI also has some refrigerant transition task force with some information in there. All right, code.iccsafe.org, or just go iccsafe.org. You will get to the codes. Okay, that's all of the international codes. Now, if you're in Northern California, I believe California is using the uniform plumbing or uniform mechanical code. You'll need to check with your local inspector of what they're enforcing. And of course, Nate has a training as well. So that's pretty much a quick introduction to A2Ls. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. I'm going to jump into a couple of quick things. Let's see. We heard the threads are going into the cylinder might be reverse thread. Is this true? Yes, it is true. They are reverse thread. There will be a reverse thread adapter that ships with the tank today. Now, later on, we might have to buy some reverse thread adapters, but right now, that adapter ships with the tank. Yes, the new recovery units and vacuum pumps are compatible with 410A. All they've done is gone to a DC motor, moved the switch away from the exhaust of the vacuum pump. There has to be a certain distance between the power switch and the exhaust of the vacuum pump, as well as going to a brushless DC motor that makes them A2L compatible. How long will 410A service equipment be available? Will we be able to service these for a while? Well, parts are going to be available for quite a while. Manufacturers have to maintain, they have a legal requirement to maintain their warranty, okay? So parts at the very least are going to be available for a while. Now, as the service equipment, I don't know. We don't really have an end of life date on 410A equipment. I would suspect that it's probably going to be 5-10 years down the road. That's kind of what we saw a little bit with R22. But we don't know that number as of right now. And that kind of falls in with dry charge. We're not quite sure how that's going to look coming down the road. Like I said, anything built, any 410A equipment built after January 1 of 2025, it will actually have a tag on it that says for service use only. All right. And that will actually be stated. So you'll be able to do an outdoor unit or an indoor unit, just not both. You will not be able to do an indoor-outdoor. And I don't know who's going to inspect all of that. Is Gensco providing fire suits? I certainly hope not, because if we got that far, we made some really, really bad decisions. Heard something about judge. Okay. What oil does 454B use? Does it travel with the refrigerant or remain around the compressor? So we're going to use the same POE, PV oils that we've used with 410A. Okay. And yes, it'll still travel with the refrigerant, just like any refrigerant system. Some systems do have an oil separator that minimizes the oil out in the system, but that oil still travels with the refrigerant. When are classes starting? Classes are going to start probably a couple of months before we start receiving equipment. So we're probably looking closer to the end of the year. So as soon as we have a better handle on exactly when equipment are landing, we will be putting out classes prior to that so that your team is trained on proper procedures before they're out in the field with it. Will the new equipment and refrigerant become more expensive? I'd love to say no, but I'd be lying. Pretty much every manufacturer has announced that there's going to be a price increase, some more significant than others. Okay. Is retrofitting R410A units a possibility with the new refrigerants? No, it is not. It cannot be a drop-in. It would be replacing indoor-outdoor equipment. Is there improved low ambient potential? Oh, there's a whole bunch coming on that there. We're going to see some new equipment that has some fantastic low ambient capabilities. And I'm not going to spoil that. We will be able to sell and install R410A in 2025. You know, it's manufactured. When do I think R410A equipment will be completely unsellable? Honestly, probably by 2027-ish. You know, that's gonna be a hard one to put a number down on because realistically, we're still gonna have that service equipment. So for new installations, 2026, January 1 of 2026, our 410A equipment will become unsellable in new installations and full system retrofits. Okay. Now that varies a little bit on your state. In Washington, they've got a little bit different laws than they do for the federal. Same in California. Idaho, Montana right now just kind of go with the federal requirements. I think Oregon's looking at doing some different things as well. Okay. So that's a moving target when 410A equipment is completely unsellable. That's going to kind of rely on supply and demand. Can you explain what refrigerant glide is? We will go over that in the full training because that's a little deeper conversation. You have two different refrigerants; they boil and condense at two different temperatures, and the difference in those temperatures is what glide is. That's a very, very, very short explanation to a longer subject, but that's essentially what we're doing. We'll go through all of that. We'll go through how to test that, how to understand that in the training later on. What is Mitsubishi doing as far as refrigerant detection? They will have refrigerant detection in all indoor coils. And then they will have a mitigation strategy. All of that's required by UL. More to come on that. I have no idea what the price on the new equipment is. I've heard a couple of our competitive manufacturers announce as high as 20% price increase. I've heard as low as 8 to 10%. New refrigerants have any odor? Absolutely not. They will not have an odor. We cannot have an odor. An odor would be mercaptan. That's what we put into natural gas and propane to make them smell. That's not natural. All right. The real reason here is mercaptan would be a non-condensable. All right. So we can't put odor into it because it's going to affect how that system functions. So it will cause problems. Price on R32 and 454. I know we have R32 in stock at Gensco right now, so you can take a look at that. I believe they're in 20-pound cylinders. 454, we're still working on getting that in stock. We don't have equipment in the field yet, so we've got a little bit of time. For mitigation, will there be a relay board we have to install if there's an existing gas furnace? I'm not quite sure yet. On the PAA coils, we'll likely have the board built in or as an accessory board on the equipment. I'm not quite sure how that's going to look yet. On gas furnaces, there will be zero change to gas furnaces. All right. It doesn't matter if you have sealed combustion or open combustion like an 80%er. There is no change to anything with gas furnaces. So if you have an existing 80% gas furnace, you can put a 454 coil on that PAA coil, no issues whatsoever. Okay, so the only thing that will be changing is a little bit on the indoor coils, air handlers, indoor heads, the wall heads, the four-way cassettes, all of those will have some minor changes there as well. Minor changes are going to be either an updated board or an additional board and a sensor in the coil or at the coil location. So no, I don't have any existing equipment compatibility concerns other than to say that if you're doing a new outdoor unit, a new 454 outdoor unit, you're going to need to do a new 54 indoor head or PAA coil or air handler to match. How different are the temperatures and pressures from the old refrigerant? Temperatures don't change. That's one big thing to understand. Temperatures don't change. We're still going to condense at very similar temperatures. We're still going to boil off at very similar temperatures as we do today. So the temperatures don't really change. Pressures are going to change roughly about 8 to 10% downward. So if you're used to seeing 130 pounds on your gauges, which really you can't do that with Mitsubishi product, but instead of running 130 pounds, you're probably going to see 120-ish, right? 115, 120, okay? On the high side, yeah, we're going to see a little bit lower head pressure trip. We'll see. We're probably going to see somewhere in the neighborhood of high pressure cutout around 620-ish, 600, something like that. Will the Mitsubishi coils be upgraded or discontinued, the retrofit coil? As of right now, we will have 410A equipment for quite a while. The coils will be refitted to 454, our current coils. There's really actually not that much change in the equipment other than the refrigerant leak detection. Will the size of the service ports on the outdoor unit be the same size as current, or are they going to be oversized and need an adapter? Size of the adapter or of the ports do not change. They're still going to be 1/4 inch. They're not going to be reverse fed. They're going to be standard adapters. All right. Anthony, can you still use analog gauges? Absolutely. You can still use analog gauges. We are bringing in replacement gauge heads for your existing gauges. We should have those here within the next several weeks. But yes, we are going to bring in replacement gauge heads. So, if you're old school like me and have multiple analog gauge heads, yes, you could convert 1 or 2 of them over to new gauge heads with 32 and 454 PT charts built into them. So yes, we are bringing those in. All right, well, thank you everyone. Hopefully this was informative and we'll keep moving forward. Have a great rest of your day.